I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign.
Hey y'all, welcome to Total Apex Sports. This is our inaugural baseball podcast that we're having. I know a couple weeks ago we mentioned it and we're having it now. My name is Chris. I am one of the site managers over at the gaming site at Total Apex. However, I am also a huge baseball fan, so I'm going to be hanging out with you guys here alongside my co-host Brandon, who is the site manager over at Sports. How you doing today, Brandon?
I'm doing good, man. I'm doing good. I'm glad we are kicking it off as opening days. Weekend is wrapping up, so let's get into it.
Absolutely, it's a perfect time to be a baseball fan, right?
Mm-hmm.
Awesome.
Exactly.
Awesome. Well, we're gonna kick it off. We've had a lot of stuff happen, in baseball so far. I know some people. I know here in Boston, we got hit with 30 degrees the last couple of days. So it doesn't necessarily feel like baseball season quite yet, but we're getting there. We're getting there. All righty. So we're gonna start off today's show just talking about some of the headlines that we've had from opening week. All right. So the first one obviously is a tale of 2 days for Aaron Judge, right? He starts off with that awful first game. The Yankees still able to pull off the win, right? But he struck out 4 times, I believe it was, in that game.
Mm-hmm.
People are like, oh, Aaron Judge, what's going on with Aaron Judge? Then the next day he cranks 2 home runs. In fact, I even heard a story, I guess, apparently the second home run he hit actually dented an ambulance because he hit it so hard and so far. I don't know if you heard that story, man.
I didn't hear that, but I can believe it with Aaron Judge, especially at Oracle. Oracle is a weird ballpark, too, because you got McCovey Cove out in right field, but if you're a pull hitter out the left, if he hits it over that glove, I could see that's where probably where the parking lots are, and I'm guessing that's where he hit it over that left center field area, where over that glove out there in left field. So they dent it. So yeah, Aaron Judge is, when he's on one, he's one of the best hitters in the game for a reason, and the exit belows are crazy off of his bat every time. So.
Absolutely. The other big story, obviously, coming out of opening day, specifically was sort of what was going on with the Pirates in that first game.
Yeah.
We had O'Neil Cruz. Obviously, he had some defensive blunders, you could say.
Yeah.
That led to an awful first start for Paul Skeens, the defending Cy Young Award winner out there in the NL. What are your thoughts on what happened in that game?
So my thing with O'Neil Cruz is he's not a center fielder. He's not a shortstop. What is he? What is he like defensively? Because they're not going to change the DH. Like, he's not going to just be a DH, because I don't know who their DH was this week off the top of my head right now. But, they should make O'Neil Cruz just a designated hitter in certain situations. And I get they want to try to use his speed to play defense in center field, but those 2 fly balls are probably the easiest fly balls that he had, but he was not able to miss. Granted, he didn't have glasses on for the second one, but still, you got to catch that second one. And the first one, you got to react better to that. I mean, that's leaving your pitcher, is leaving Skeens hanging. And it sucks for Skeens because those weren't charged errors, apparently. They were all earned runs for Skeens. So his year is not off to the greatest start in the world either. So, because of two major defensive blunders by the new center fielder O'Neil Cruz. So,
yeah, exactly. And I mean, it looks like at least today the DH was Brian Reynolds for the Pirates.
Yeah,
so I'm not entirely sure why they can't just flip flop.
That's what I'm saying. Put Reynolds in center field.
Exactly. That seems like a very easy solution here.
Yeah.
I don't know why the Pirates aren't doing that and making that decision, but obviously, I mean, Skeens is sort of the negative beneficiary here of that. Although, I mean, he does need to pitch better if he's going to be an ace of course, he does have to limit the contact,
Yeah.
but he would have been out of that inning with just about anybody else in center field,
Yeah.
And the other thing that sort of throws me off with this whole O'Neil Cruz in center field thing is, I mean, even, so many players are put, like, if you're gonna hide a defender in the outfield, why are you hiding him at center field, which requires the most athleticism of
Exactly.
and the most judgment,
Yeah.
You could stick him. I mean, we obviously, the Red Sox for a long time survived with Manny Ramirez out in left field, but the riot the Red Sox fan base would have had if we stuck Manny Ramirez in center field,
especially in Fenway with the triangle out in right center, and then you have to play the monster in left center. The center field is hard in general, but it is hard at Fenway Park. It is hard to play the way the especially right center plays around Pesky's pole, because balls can hit off the Pesky pole wall and drive up to right center really easily. And then you got the triangle out there in right center, then off of the where the monster kind of connects and everything like that. No, it's just center field in Fenway is probably one of the least positions I would want to play in the majors right now. But
you'd argue on defense, probably the two hardest defensive positions outside of catcher maybe is shortstop and center field. And they moved him from shortstop to center field, which I find incredibly ironic, So hopefully
he has the speed to play, like he has the athleticism. It's just the judgment aspects.
Exactly. He makes really bad reads, and so I don't know. We'll see how that plays out, but it's obviously not a great start there for the year for him. We've had a lot of different teams, having some good starts to their season. Some of them we could expect, some of them not. As of this afternoon, the Dodgers, Yankees, and Mets were all undefeated. I admit I haven't seen the scores of today's games yet, so I don't know if that's still the case. But I know for the first two games, those teams all looked every bit of what people would expect them of. The Brewers obviously beating up on the White Sox, but the Brewers is an interesting one, right? Because the Brewers every single year we come in, and we talk about the Brewers. Oh, they've traded. This is going to be the year they fall apart. This is the year they're going to sink back. They don't have anybody. They have no pitching. They have no offense. They have no bullpen. They let go of all their good players, and every year they find a way to just be right back on the top of that NL Central, right?
Yeah, well, here's the thing. Let's take it a grain of salt. They were playing the Chicago White Sox.
Well, that's what I was going to say. But I will, obviously now that's looking a little bit worse. But to the White Sox credit, they made a few decent signings this offseason. There was some talk that they would at least be better than they were last year, right? And that certainly hasn't been the case to start with.
I'm sure we'll get into it.
Run differential so far.
Sorry, my fault.
Go ahead. Absolutely.
I'm sure we'll get into it here in a little bit when we talk about season predictions and dark horses and stuff like that. But Murataka Murakami for the White Sox has been probably one of their best. Like, I think he's homered in all three games so far, like 3 home runs already this season, just behind my pick, one of my picks for dark horses, which I'll get into later. But Chase DeLauder has been a godsend for Guardians. But I'll get into that later.
Yeah.
When we get to it. But yeah, the Marlins is another surprise as well. And they're actually, I saw they won on a walk-off today against Colorado. So they're 3-0. Surprise. So, but yeah, go. So with the Dodgers and Yankees, no one was shocked there with those two. I think the Mets is a surprise. I mean, I knew the Mets are good. I know the Mets have talent. I know they got, but I just didn't think. I thought they were going to be third, to be honest, in the NL East. To be honest with you,
that's fair.
At the end of the day, and I thought the Pirates were going to be better what they were too. I thought that series was going to be split 2-1. Whoever won it 2 games to 1, but. And it just turns out the Mets, know how to start seasons. Let's see if they can continue the momentum with all the way through.
100%. They have the talent to do it, and that's sort of why I included them in that group. If you look purely on paper, they are a pretty loaded team, you know. But they're so hot and cold, like you said. They're very streaky. You know, you have one fantastic year, then the next year mediocre. They'll start off strong, and then they'll have massive slumps. So we'll see if they can put it all together. And then one other team I just wanted to highlight, obviously, the Braves and Cardinals were both undefeated too, but the Braves is an interesting one because as we'll talk about with them soon, is they really got walloped in spring training with injuries. So to see them still coming out and playing the way that they are is an interesting one for sure. So they're going to be a team to keep an eye on.
At least Ronald wasn't injured like he has been the last couple of years. If Ronald was injured, this would probably be a different story. But
100%. He's such a fun player, right? I mean, he's such a fun player to watch.
I love Ronald Acuna as a player. He's a fun player to watch, man.
Exactly. In my opinion, the MLB is better when he's playing. With all the young stars, really, with the players that just have that electric, energy about them. Soto obviously being one of those. Fernando Tatis for a long time had been one of those. You you could go on and on with those types of. I just think it makes the league more fun and makes it more approachable for everybody. So you'll have to see that. I'd love to talk about the Toronto Blue Jays.
Yes.
Too. Having their 2 walk-off wins, but also I just found I found a stat today that I didn't even realize they had done, but their pitching staff has actually set the record for the first 3 games of the season for strikeouts accumulated a modern record. What are your thoughts on that one?
When you add Dylan Cease to that rotation, and he was a major contributor for them getting that record. I think it was 8 to 10 that he had his start the other day, something like that. It was 8 to 10. I know it was in that range, but Dylan Cease was filthy in his start for the Blue Jays the other day. And it just, Toronto is the defending AL champions for a reason. They're going to be a tough out in October. If they stay healthy, and get the consistent pitching from Dylan Cease, I think they're going to be a tough out in the AL in October. I know a lot of people aren't as high on them in baseball preseason right now as, because of the Yankees and the, teams like that and the Red Sox. The AL East is probably the best division of baseball by far. Let's just say that right now, like top to bottom, it's the best.
Absolutely.
Because you got the Orioles who start 2-1, and they're, they had their best offensive day today against the Twins in an 8-6 win. Helsley's looked good in the 2 save opportunities he's had for Baltimore. So that was a concern everyone had about Baltimore was the bullpen and how the back end was going to, round it out. Ryan Helsley's looked great in the two outings. I'll say that. But going back to the Blue Jays, I mean, you got Vladdy, you got, Springer still, you lost Bichette, but at the same time, not really dropping a step. And I know they're without the Savage for a little bit too, but once he comes back, their rotation is going to be probably one of the best in baseball, if not the best in baseball, in my opinion, right now as well, with the Cease and the Savage and all the guys that were on that team from last year. Hoffman does look shaky. He did look shaky, in one of the walk-off wins. He gave up the home run to tie it. I think it was. I can't remember who hit it, but I remember he gave up a home run that up one. Then they tied it. So it's the A's tied it. Can't remember who off the A's hit it, but the A's are going to be in a. That's the interesting thing about this year's opening day, opening series and stuff like that. A lot of interesting matchups of teams. Especially on the AL side, are going to be in the race and everything like that. So that's where I'm at right now with the Blue Jays. I agree.
Yeah, the Blue Jays are because obviously they made the World Series last year. So unlike previous years, they're coming in with some expectations and some pressure, right? Yeah. The expectation is they've only gotten better this offseason and they should be back into it again. Yeah. And when the Blue Jays have had expectations in the past, a couple years ago when they were picked as the favorite in the division, right? And they sort of underperformed that season, right?
Right.
It'll be interesting to see over the course of the year if they can hold it together. Because I agree, on paper, that rotation should be one of, if not the best in the at least AL and arguably the majors. Obviously Seattle, I think, is in that conversation as well.
Yeah.
They always are.
And then you got the Dodgers out west. So obviously their rotation top to bottom.
I mean, they're just something else. They're like an all-star team, just assembled all by themselves, right? But I agree with you with the AL East. I mean, if you look at some of the projection systems, and I didn't put those, in the show today, but if you were looking at Pacoda and a couple
Yeah.
of the other ones, they have all 5 AL East teams at 500 or better.
Yeah.
You could make a legitimate case that all 5 teams will be above 500 by the end of the year, and
Yeah.
that's unheard of in modern day baseball. You can have 3 teams, 4 teams, but to have all 5 of them above 500, it just doesn't happen. And so it's certainly going to be a dogfight for all 5 of those teams, and mistakes. We talk about just early on in the season, little mistakes can add up in a division like that.
Yeah, exactly.
It really can. So, all right. Do you have any other highlights from any other the game before I start shifting into some of the extensions and stuff like that?
For me, I just wanted to shout. Who was it that had the? I'll shout out DeLauder here, as I will later on. DeLauder has been like incredible, like leading the league in home runs for the Guardians in a short time, homering in all 3 games so far for the Guardians as well. Probably the favorite right now early on after week 1, like the first series of Rookie of the Year in the AL. And that's the thing too, like he was doing it at James Madison. So we all know, like us people here in Harrisonburg, Virginia, and in Virginia, the 540 know what this kid is capable of, and the Cleveland fans are going to love him soon enough. He's going to be a name. It's interesting. It's going to be interesting to see if he makes can be a rookie that makes the All-Star game this year. I know AL is stacked in outfield, especially right field where he plays with Aaron Judge, and it's going to be tough, obviously, to get over Aaron Judge. But as a reserve, I'd be impressive for the daughter if he keep up this hot start and crack the All-Star team.
Absolutely. And speaking of teams, that are always in it, right? The Cleveland Guardians just find a way to be competitive year in and year out. They're another, maybe not quite as much consistency as the Brewers in terms of winning the division, but certainly always in it, and they seem to get another star here, and DeLauder, and that's going to be exciting, but he's not the only young player that's really had success. There's been a lot of young players, having success. Obviously I'm familiar with Roman Anthony here with the Boston Red Sox, of course. And he had a great 4-hit day that was quickly overshadowed, hours later. Everybody was talking about it, but I mean, he started off really hot. I know Detroit has a couple players that started off really hot.
Yes.
And so it's an exciting time for some of these young players. I was also going to just quickly mention obviously you actually brought this story to me, Brandon, the wind at Wrigley Field.
Yes, I did. So it was Ian Happ, I think, when I saw it. It might have been someone else, but it was Ian. I think one of the Cubs players hammered the ball out to left field, and the winds were swirling in from left field, and the ball died. And they had the projection of the hit because of the X and below was going to go over the left center field wall and probably almost hit the scoreboard and maybe out of the stadium, but it died, and only in the left fielder called it for an out. And I was like, for the Nats, I was like, jeez. When I saw that, I had to share that with Chris because that is a crazy, crazy outcome. And that's what you get in those Midwest cities this time of year. The winds are going to be swirling, the cold weather, the ball is going to die. Until we get to like May, yes, they were that strong, Molly, on that and on the for that Cubs Nationals series. And it was impressive that the Nationals scored 10 runs on opening day against the Cubs. Like it was crazy to see that, as a lot of people were like, the Cubs were a hot team coming in, picking for the NL Central to win it. Definitely some bad luck for the hitter, but that's baseball for you, as we would like to say on the show. That's baseball, But let's get into the extensions. I think
that's a big one. I wanted to save that for last, right? Because obviously the Cubs went a little crazy here. Extended 2 of their young players, in Pete Crow Armstrong and Nico Hornier, sort of following the Braves path, right? The Braves were sort of the first team that started doing that, with Acuna was on a great deal. They had a couple other players that they locked down really quickly too. What are your thoughts on that? And who do you think, do you think there's more in the works, or is this just like a perfect storm for the Cubs where it just they had the players that were willing to do it, they had
Yeah.
some flexibility, you know?
Well, so I think PCA and Nico Horner are two great extensions for the Cubs here because they're probably, probably going to be the cornerstones of the Cubs franchise for the next probably 10, 15 years. Let's just be honest here. Those two dudes are really good, especially Nico Horner defensively, but PCA has been like a two-way, like really good defensive center fielder, and like he can swing the bat pretty well, like 30 and 30 30 home run, 30 steals last year. Like that guy has been incredible for the Cubs. I'm glad they got their money. I just need Baltimore to extend Gunnar Henderson because they got the Shane Baz deal done yesterday. Yesterday. They got it done before his outing today. And his outing wasn't the best today for Shane Baz. But at the same time, they're looking at the potential of Shane Baz and everything like that. But they need to get a Gunnar done as soon as possible. Gunnar walked away at the table. They did offer him one, but he did walk away. There is plenty of time still for Gunnar's extension to get done. I think that is going to be in the works. From what I've gathered from like the Baltimore reporters and everything like that, the people that have been following the team and everything like that, I think it's in the works. It's gonna it might happen sooner or later. Sooner or later, it might happen later. But I don't think Gunner's going to leave Baltimore anytime soon, especially when they're like willing to pay for guys like Pete Alonso and guys like this to keep that lineup going. Willing to make the moves to make this young core get into the playoffs and do everything they can. But it is also a little case of the Cubs catching good luck too, like you said too, with the guys who are willing to stay in Chicago. Play for that historical franchise, that historical ballpark, that historical team, and making noise, So it is a little bit of both. But I think the Gunnar deal is probably going to be something that will come up with, I think by like June maybe, that we will hear about a Gunnar Henderson deal. That's my prediction on that. I think Gunnar will get extended by June.
Agreed, and I think that's one of the big names the Orioles have to look up. I think the Red Sox obviously have Roman Anthony out there. He's somebody that I think they should be trying to lock up. They've gotten a lot of extensions done recently, actually, with their players. Should be nice to see him. And then the A's are another interesting one. With their moves, hopefully to Vegas the next couple of years, right? I think that's something that they really need to establish, right? Especially moving to a new city where when some of the other teams moved to Las Vegas, it was a little bit different. They had some established loyalty, some other things going on, or they were a brand new team. With the A's, they don't have that massive fan base that's coming with them to Vegas, and they aren't necessarily a great team, so they're not going to garner as much support as, say, the Vegas Golden Knights did when they came there, And so I think one of the biggest things they got to do is really establish the young core and have, established that there's players there for the team to root for, and I know they did that. Was it Kurtz that they locked up in?
I think so. I think it was.
So they've already started doing that. They've obviously got Rooker that could get locked up as well. A couple other guys, but I definitely think that's the direction they should be going, is trying to get some of these extensions done.
Yeah, fully agree. The A's need to extend Jacob Wilson ASAP because that is hard to get a great shortstop on your team, and Jacob Wilson is probably one of the great young shortstops. I don't know where, like, I know Bobby Witt. You got Bobby Witt. You got Ellie. You got Gunnar Henderson, as I mentioned. Those are the three for me that are the best shortstops right now. Whatever order you want to put them. I like to put Gunnar at one. This is because I'm a Orioles fan and I'm biased, and I'm going to put. I know Bobby Witt's the better all-around player than Gunnar Henderson, but I think Gunnar Henderson is a better pop guy with a better pop on his bat a little bit. I mean, Bobby Witt also's got great pop in his bat too. Don't get me wrong, and I love Bobby Witt Jr., but. And Ellie's a close third. I would say right now, if I were to do it like 1A, 1B is Bobby Witt and Gunnar Henderson, and then Ellie's there. But Jake Wilson is one of the shortstops that hits for average, plays good defense, plays a good glove out there at shortstop, reliable. He needs to get a little bit more pop at his back before he gets into the top echelon of shortstops, in my opinion.
For sure. I hear you. No, I agree with all of that. So we'll see what happens with that. So now moving in, some of the teams that have really been hammered with injuries, and I know there's a lot of information on there. You don't have to worry necessarily about all the information, but really there's been 3 or 4 teams that have
Yeah,
been completely decimated by injuries early on, and not just injuries, right? Because teams could have 7 or 8 players on the IL, but
yeah,
none of them are the impact players, right? So it
yeah,
doesn't matter so much. But these teams, they've really been hit hard with major players to their team, right? And so
yeah,
the Braves, obviously, I started talking about them before, right?
yeah,
And you mentioned, thankfully Ronald Acuna is healthy right now and he's playing,
yeah,
but they lost so many of their pitchers, right? That they don't even have, backups. I know there was some talk about Lucas Giolito,
yeah.
being a fix for them too, right? And I think in fact that he'd even leaked at one point he'd signed and then he hadn't signed and then
Right. Yeah,
I don't know what's exactly going on there, but
yeah,
they need some help, and that's what made as I mentioned before their start so impressive, right?
yeah,
Is they've been able to weather some of this despite. I mean, you look at some of their pitchers, Strider, Schellenbach, you
yep.
know, those are 2 of their top 3 pitchers, arguably,
Hmm.
right? I mean, you could put them in different ways, but potentially the 2 of their top 3 pitchers, right behind Sale, and so to be able to weather that to start,
Yeah,
is great. And how long are they going to be able to weather that? Right?
yeah,
They can make it through a team once, twice, maybe even 3 teams. But as those starts start piling up and you go longer and longer without
yeah,
those pitchers there, especially the pitchers, what is their next plan of action?
yeah.
Right, and they don't have a lot of depth in their starting pitching either.
No,
In minor leagues, they've sort of got all their guys are already up at this
yeah,
point right now. So if somebody else goes down, what's their plan?
yeah.
What do you think, Brandon? Should the Braves be looking for more starting pitching somewhere? Should they try to ride the storm? Should they shift, the Tampa Bay's patented bullpen game model?
Yeah,
Go something like that every 5 days.
yeah. I think the bullpen and riding it out, the combination of those two strategies is what I think they're going to implement here early on until Strider gets back. It just depends on when Strider comes back. Obviously, Sean Murphy too being out, as you can see on the slide, he's out there. So they're technically they're starting catchers out. So it's hard to new catcher, new pitch communications and stuff like that too. It's like for these pitchers now they've worked with all the catchers and everything like that, but at the same time you'd probably rather have Sean Murphy back there than whoever. I think it's Darno right now still, right? Is Darno
Yeah.
back there? So
Yeah.
yeah, I'd rather have Sean Murphy 100 defensively than Travis Darno. So
Agreed.
so
Agreed.
that's what I'm at with
100%.
the Braves.
Yeah. So we'll see what they do. I agree. It's going to be a hybrid, but and as you mentioned, the NL East is another very tough
Yeah,
division, right?
yeah.
I mean, after, obviously the AL East and arguably the NL West, I'd say potentially the NL East is the third best division
I
potentially.
would have it. I would have the two East divisions ahead in the AL West. The only reason is the two bottom teams in I would think in the Rockies and in the Diamond. Well, with the Diamondbacks or Giants have potential. I'm not
Yeah.
so, but I get why you would have that because the Nationals and Marlins. So what do we expect from those two? But I think the Rockies out like their bad is outweighs the other two in the NL
That's
East,
fair.
in my
That's
opinion.
fair. Yeah, I know. I could definitely see that argument, and that puts even more pressure on the Braves, right? With to weather these injuries,
Yeah,
because you can't fall too far behind the Mets, the Phillies.
yeah.
If you start falling behind it, apparently the Marlins, right? Because they're
They're 30-0
winning
right now.
games
Well,
too. But
they did play Colorado, but like I said, I
yeah,
think Miami is an interesting team. Even though with Stowers right now, he's on the IL a little bit here. They've been kind of like hit with the injury bug a little bit, the Marlins too. And it was so I find it impressive that they won this series and Yuri Perez looked good in his start for the Marlins. And
definitely.
it's an
Yeah,
interesting situation there down in Miami. They're
yeah,
going to try to start the actually trying to win stage of the rebuild. Not make a crack at with the Braves and Phillies and Mets yet, but they're going to try to win some games, and they're not going to. I don't think they're going to finish last in the East. I think that's going to be Washington, unfortunately,
I
this
agree.
year.
I
But
agree. Well, and it's interesting because Washington has some good young pieces there too,
yep,
right? I mean,
yep,
they're not super far off
yeah,
either. But I agree, they're both clearly, towards the bottom. But the thing that's interesting about the Marlins too, and they actually are on this list, right, as another team that had a lot of injuries. But
yeah,
but the thing that's interesting about the Marlins is it seems like every 2 to 3 years or so, they surprise and end up making a push, right? And
exactly.
nobody seems to quite understand why
Why?
or when or how.
Yeah,
But I think the Marlins, one of their biggest strengths has been and continues to be, as you mentioned, their young pitching. Yuri Perez, but they have other young pitchers there too that can really. And if you have good pitching in this league that can
yeah,
hold teams down, you have a chance every game,
yeah,
right? And they
exactly.
do have that. So I think that's what gives them, the potential, especially over the Nationals, who are still trying to figure out their rotation a bit.
Especially after trading Mackenzie Gore to the Rangers.
Yeah.
That really like put Nationals back a little bit. Giant. They got rid of Mackenzie Gore. They're resetting the timeline once again, trying to build around James Wood and CJ Abrams. So that's the interesting aspect there. So with
Yeah.
the Nationals.
Absolutely, absolutely. And then, of course, moving on with the Blue Jays, we mentioned you Savage a little bit when we were talking about,
Yep.
the Blue Jays, but you also got Barrios is also on the IL.
Yep.
You've got Bieber also on the IL, right? So those are three
Three
legitimate.
legit aces of the
Yeah,
World Series team are gone. Like are gone.
exactly.
Yeah.
Which is just so scary for, because if you look at their rotation, it's not bad right now, even
Yeah.
with all that. So just
Yeah.
imagine with all these three coming back, how incredibly dangerous that team really is going to
Especially
be.
a Savage. He if he was healthy and he had a full slate of starts, and I think he can still get a chance to challenge Scooble, but he's a dark horse for the Cy Young right now for me.
Yeah,
If he's healthy, because the way he looked in the postseason last year, I'm gonna bet on him looking like he did in the postseason for the Blue Jays when he gets back and
I
big
agree.
challenge Tariq Skubal for the AL Cy Young. I don't think he'll win it. I think Skubal is still Skubal, but
Yeah.
we'll see.
Yeah, you got in a way you've got to bet on Scoobo for now until somebody proves otherwise, right?
Yep,
But
exactly.
I don't disagree. He looked great when he came back, and nobody necessarily knew what he was going to look like in the playoffs, and he came out and shoved, right? So
Yeah,
I people, I think people sleep on Toronto as a whole as a team, at least rotation wise. I mean, maybe not so much now that they made the World Series, but I think people forget just how deep that rotation is when
yeah,
it's healthy,
yeah,
and that could be a scary thing when they get healthy. And then, of course, Anthony Santander is also hurt,
yeah,
but they have enough offense to sort of weather that, I think.
yeah, yeah,
Um, so we'll see how fast some of those players come back. The Brewers is another team that's been interesting, with some injuries, and they're a team, right, that, like I said, they're always in it for some reason,
yeah,
but you would think, looking at the team on paper already, they're not that great. So to try to ask them to battle through 7 players on the IL, right, would be a hard thing. And yet, again, you mentioned that obviously they played the White Sox. It's not like they're out there playing the Dodgers and sweeping them, right?
yeah, exactly.
But the fact is, I mean, it's still Major League Baseball, and the worst
Yeah,
teams win. Win at least 2 out of every 5, right? And
yeah,
and those are the absolute worst teams, right?
yeah,
So it's still hard
exactly.
to win a game. If they're winning it, they have the best run differential in the entire league, or at least they
Yeah,
did going into today's slate of
yeah,
games, right? And but their injuries are certainly not nothing either, right?
yeah.
Jackson,
Cheerio.
Soria was one of their best players, especially on offense. A bat that they really need because they don't have a lot of offense necessarily coming from that team,
Right.
right? And then they've got Quinn Priester, who came over
Yeah,
from the Red Sox and had
yeah,
a fantastic year for them last year.
yeah,
Really solidified, what was a questionable rotation, right?
yeah,
And he just finally seemed to put it all together where he hadn't been able to with Pittsburgh and with Boston.
yeah,
So that's certainly a loss for them. And then Andrew Vaughn, who obviously came over from the White Sox when they moved
yeah.
on to him. He's
Exactly.
another offensive bat, right? So how long do you think the Brewers can keep this up?
You know what, though? I think the reason the Brewers can keep it up is that bullpen with the Uribe at the back end. Like that bullpen is so strong up there in Milwaukee. It's crazy. They like 7-8-9. If you get into a tight game with 7-8-9 against the Brewers, yeah, good luck trying to come back because 9 out of 10 times those guys will shut down a game up in there in Milwaukee, especially Uribe. Like either 8th or 9th inning. I can't remember. Like, there's another guy too that throws hard at the back end of their bullpen. But I remember Uribe is their closer. But I might comments. Feel free to fact check me on that. But if you're from Milwaukee, but Uribe is one of those guys that is filthy. So
absolutely
as well. But I think the Milwaukee Brewers are one of those teams where so it's just yes 7, 8, 9 dang they fine. But absolutely. But for me too, I think the Brewers also have the opportunity to shock a lot of people's expectations for them because of the moves they made, especially getting ready for Freddie Peralta, sending him to the New York Mets this offseason and everything like that to make noise in the Central again, just because of what they did last year. Even though they fell short against the Dodgers, and everyone was going to fall short.
Everyone falls short, right?
Against that Dodgers team, but at the same time, I think they're going to. I think there's still a lot of those guys on the offensive side back from that team, and a couple of the young pitchers that were on that team too. Like they're ready and hungry to make noise, even though they don't have their ace from last year anymore. The other thing too is to keep an eye on the Cincinnati Reds. With that young offense in the NL Central as well, and their pitching staff with Hunter Green leading it, and the NL Central is a fun division this year. More fun than it was last year. I
agree. You could argue any of the 5 teams, right, have a chance. And what's so funny about the Brewers is first they said, "Oh, it's the system. It's David Stearns, right, and just putting out together magic, just the right triggers to pull." And then he leaves to the Mets and the Brewers are still competitive. Then they say, "Oh, well, it's Craig Counsell. He's a brilliant manager. They lost him. They're going to lose a step." And arguably they've gotten better without him, right? And now it's, they have no ace anymore. Freddie Peralta is the last of their aces that are going. And here they are just winning games again, and it's just like over and over again. And I agree with you. They're a team that seems to pull pitching, especially bullpen pitching, kind of out of nowhere. They're the Rays of the NL in that regard, I think. Exactly. When they just constantly just churn, a bullpen pitchers out, time and time again. And that is really a far more of an asset than people realize. People forget about the bullpen a little bit sometimes, because they're not throwing the 5-6 innings. But, if you've got a lockdown bullpen and you've got a lead going in, it's automatic, so that really helps them a lot. 100%. And then, of course, just really quickly touch base on the Yankees. We already kind of knew about some of this. We knew Cole wasn't going to be ready, coming into the season, but they're obviously hurting with Schmidt. We knew Rodon wasn't going to be ready. The question is, how long is it going to be before, Cole and Rodon are ready? If they can come back quicker, that's going to be obviously massive for the Yankees. If they have any setbacks, it's going to delay them, and that's going to be hard for the Yankees to weather. So it really all just comes down to, how long they're out for, right? Because the team already knew coming into the season those 2 guys were going to be out to start the season, and so they had some time to prepare for that. You know? But how long can they hold that down for?
Well, when you have performances like you did with Fried on opening night, the opening night, and then you got Schlittler also having a strong start too, the young pitcher from last year, like Schlittler, I think that's his name. When you got guys like that still pitching like they can, and they'll be fine until Cole and Rodon and all those guys come back. It's like, especially if Max Fried can still give you 6-7 innings and get to the back end of like with Clay Holmes and all that stuff, like it'll be a good, or not Clay Holmes. Shoot, who's okay? Bednar. Sorry, Bednar is still their closer. So if you can get to Bednar, good, very good stuff.
Agreed. So. And it's funny because that bullpen is what sort of cost the Yankees, right, last postseason.
Yeah.
So they want to make sure to stabilize that. If that can stay stable and stay consistent, I think they'll be okay. But I was sort of talking about it with one of my friends that's a Yankees fan, right, is that the Red Sox and really the Blue Jays, and with some of the Blue Jays injuries too, the Red Sox best chance to compete at the top of this, and Baltimore actually, you could argue too, is for some of these injuries to stretch on a little bit, right?
Yeah,
They have
the holiday rehab has started for the Baltimore. So
yeah.
Jackson Holiday will be probably coming back sooner than expected off his Hammond injury. Now the Westbrook one is kind of probably going to be the one that lingers, and Kobe Mayo is going to have to step up and continue to step up and be productive Thursdays.
Yeah,
So.
and that's what's so frustrating about the Red Sox start being 1-2, playing the Reds, who, you know, arguably we could have beaten. You know, they're a good team. They're a nice young team. They've got a phenomenal manager, right? That's always going to get the best out of his players. You know, but the Red Sox, if they really truly want to compete to win the division, you know, I still think they're going to be easily in competition all year for the playoffs, right? I think the whole AL East is. But if they want to be at the top to win the division, they had to get a bit of a pad on all three of these teams, right? Because we mentioned, you know, we didn't really mention the Orioles in this as far as like the top of the injuries, but arguably you could have put the whole AL East except for Boston, you know, on this list, right? With some of the injuries they've had. You know, and it was really the Red Sox chance to build a little bit of a cushion to try to weather for when those players come back, since we've been so healthy. And that didn't happen. In fact, the exact opposite. We're at the bottom. You know, I mean, granted, again, it's early. It's only 3 games in.
Yeah, but, 3 games in.
But this is the chance the Red Sox have to at least try to, you know, pad a little bit of a lead here. And so far, they haven't capitalized.
No. I mean, some of the teams that have been – I think I would put Boston as one of those teams that has been one of the disappointing teams to start the opening weekend. I was thinking they would have won that series against Cincinnati. I don't think they would have swept them. I think it would have been what it was, 2-1 Cincinnati, but I you know, instead, but 2-1 Red Sox. I think Cincinnati would have won. I think Cincinnati wins the Hunter Green matchup against Crochet. I think I love Crochet. Don't get me wrong, but Hunter Green is a phenomenal young pitcher in this league right now, and he's always a tough out. I think that's one of the ones that they won. But the Boston Red Sox for me right now, they'll be fine. I think it's one you know, early on in the year, they'll be a team that is going to be there throughout the 162 game marathon. So
agreed. And I really quickly wanted to touch base about the World Baseball Classic. Just give a last little thought. We won't spend too much time on this because it's been, you know, a week past that now, week and a half or so, you know, but I'd be remiss to not mention, you know, USA falling short again, right? And this is, you know, last time they went to the finals and they played Japan and lost, right? And Japan was arguably the best team there. You know, it was such an exciting game. Right, it went right down to the wire, you know. And when Japan went out and disappointed, right, so early on in the tournament this year, it felt like it was USA's, you know, tournament to lose at that point. And that's exactly what they did. They lost it. You know,
ironically, the same score they lost it in 2023 too. Like it's 3-2. Bottom of the ninth, striking out the last 2 at-bats, including Judge, the guy that you had as a captain. Ironically, they had Trout as a captain in 23 against Ohtani, striking out, swinging. This time, Aaron Judge against the Cubs closer, Valencia, strikes out, swinging. So it's just it is a weird situation with both games. I don't know what is the curse of the U.S. World Baseball Classic team when it comes to finals and their bats going cold. They need to figure that out with DeRosa if they want to keep DeRosa. Obviously, I think he said he wanted to stay as USA manager. So they need him and USA Baseball need to figure out how do we get these. What is our mental hurdle in these finals every year? Because we can get to the final.
Yeah.
Every year, it's just the bats go cold in a final. So
exactly. And, you know, that's funny, Molly, right? At this point, you know, but truly, I mean, it's not a shortage of talent, right? You know, this was arguably the best team they've ever had, right? And so is it an issue of coaching? Is it an issue of just not having balance? You know, is it that they have too many superstars with too many voices in that locker room? And, you know, I mean, what is it that's stopping them at the end?
I do think the Corbin Carroll injury hurt a lot more than what we thought it was going to be. I know Roman Anthony was good in the World Baseball Classic, but having another speedster out there to set the tone at the top of the lineup. We could have had Bobby Witt hit second instead of Bryce Harper.
Yeah.
That the lineup juggling that DeRosa had to do because of the
Yep.
injury to Corbin Carroll. Probably Corbin Carroll would have been the leadoff instead of Bobby, or he probably would have hit second. Either way, you have two legit speedsters at the top of the lineup. Instead, you have one who couldn't get on base in Bobby Witt Jr. that failed to set the tone, which was a shocker. And also a shocker, too, we hadn't gotten to Kyle Riley yet. I don't know if we will, but his World Baseball Classic struggles have continued into this season. Before today, he was 0 for 8 with 8 strikeouts before today's game for Seattle. So, yeah, that's not great for Kyle Raleigh, and that was a bummer for us there. The catcher situation, having to bench Raleigh for Will Smith was, not great either, even though Will Smith had a good game against the Dominican, but didn't have a good game in the final. Yep. No one did offensively other than Bryce with the home run late. And then obviously, the situation with the Gunnar being benched for Bregman, obviously you want to play the guy that actually traditionally plays third over the guy that plays shortstop and doesn't play third that much. I get that. Everything like that. But that's the thing too, like you have short time to train these guys on the position. So you rather have a guy that knows that position and knows it well. I think what Venezuela did with their roster to get into, or they did the surprise winner, is a lot of veteran experience at key roles, like Salvador Perez, veteran. He's been there, done that. So many years. He was an AL MVP. He was a World Series MVP. So Salvi is one of the best captors out there, and he was able to control that game behind the dish, at the plate, through and through for Eduardo Rodriguez in that final. Like, a lot of the game was being called. I feel like too, that was probably the best I saw Eduardo Rodriguez pitch ever. And it was that final. I think that's due to Salvi being wise to a lot of what the tendencies of the U.S. were doing, and the scouting reports and all that stuff.
Absolutely.
So, and also too, when you got a healthy Ronald Acuna, the World Baseball Classic MVP Michael Garcia, who is a great young third baseman for the Royals, that Venezuela team was impressive through and through. They did deserve to win this World Baseball Classic because they got the timely hits, especially the double from Suarez. After you thought with the Harper home run, the momentum was all on Team USA side. Unfortunately for your Boston Red Sox, it was off of Mr. Whitlock.
Who had such a fantastic tournament too.
Yeah,
right?
He had a great tournament up to that point, which is crazy, but to think about.
Absolutely.
But to say the least, Eugenio Suarez delivered a championship for his country, and he should be proud of that. And I think he's taken that so far and proven to be a great asset for the Reds in this starting opening weekend. Absolutely. So,
in fact, he's the reason they won today, right? He had the 3-run home run to pass the Red Sox in the 6th, and that was all they needed. So the only other thing I wanted to mention really quickly with that, I think the one other thing we overlooked a little bit with USA was how much of an impact only having Tarek Skubal for a couple, the one game.
The one start.
Right, how much that mattered, because they never found a full replacement as a third truly legitimate starting pitcher.
Yeah,
right?
And also not having Webb in the final too was questionable.
Yeah.
They had McLean to start that final. Now, granted, Webb didn't look good on opening night against the Yankees. But still, like I would rather have Logan Webb than McLean. And McLean's a young pitcher. He'll learn. I think he'll be a good young pitcher, but in this league.
Sure. But to put him in that type of spotlight and that much pressure, was tough. And I just think in general for the tournament, really this was a great thing for baseball and a great thing for the tournament right? We had Venezuela obviously won, which is a little bit of a surprise, a very good team, but you're used to Japan, USA, and Dominican Republic. Those are really the top three,
Yeah.
right? And now we've got Venezuela. We had Italy coming in and looking phenomenal for most of that tournament, right? That's an interesting, exciting team. You have Puerto Rico, who's competitive in there. You've got Mexico, who's competitive in there. I think the more teams we have that are competitive, the better it is. It makes it the more exciting tournament. And I think we saw that a bit this season. So I'm excited for it.
Oh yeah, for
forward.
sure. For sure.
Yeah.
Like that World Baseball Classic was fun. But we gotta talk about fantasy sleepers and all this stuff and analyzing the season predictions, which is gonna be I think this is gonna be a fun 2026 season. Now, granted, we'll probably talk about on this show as the episodes move on about the inevitable CBA. I know we will be talking about it. Let's not dwell into the negative. Let's get into these predictions. And everything. I think fantasy wise, a good idea of a player for me, Chris, fantasy wise this year. Keep an eye out for I like Framber in Detroit. I think Framber Valdez is going to have a bounce back year in Detroit. I really do. So keep an eye out for him on the pitching side. A hitter in fantasy. Although he's had a slow start, I think Gunnar Henderson is going to bounce back, wanting the contract money. He did get his first hit today for Baltimore. He did get on base a couple of times. I think, sometimes getting back with your team and everything like that. He did have the last couple of games was great for Gunnar in the spring training. But I think sometimes with the wind and everything like that, and facing an underrated pitching staff in Minnesota, like Minnesota's pitching staff is really underrated as well. He almost, I felt like bases loaded, and the one loss that Baltimore had this season on Saturday, Gunnar had an opportunity to get a big moment, bases loaded, 2 outs in the bottom of the 7th, and he just missed it. He was close. It was, I think it was just off the end of the bat, and he was slammed his bat. He was angry with himself for missing that pitch because it was dead red middle pitch, and Gunnar just barely missed it. If he hits it like I know Gunnar can, that was probably a grand slam. And Baltimore's 3-0 right now, but Baltimore's not 3-0; they're 2-1 because of. But I think Gunnar is a good fantasy asset for daily fantasy. I also think your guys like Bobby Witt, Ellie De La Cruz, guys like that. Also, if you've been playing Chase DeLauder in DFS as well, you've been making some money right now. And I know his value is going to go up after this week, but keep on playing Chase DeLauder. That kid is going to impress y'all. I know he'll have his struggles, as you see here. That was after one of his home runs, celebrating around the bases. So that kid is a legit star in the making for Cleveland. What about you, Chris? What are some of your sleepers?
Yeah, so I would say a few other names that we could name a lot of big names, right? You know, and for me, it depends on what your format is, right?
Yeah.
If you're going by categories, the best thing for me when I build my team is to find players that have that balance of all of it, right?
Yeah.
I don't, instead of, a lot of people will find, this person will cover my home runs. This person will cover my stolen bases.
Yeah.
I tend to try to find multiple people that do multiple things.
Exactly.
I find that balance is the best way to win multiple categories because you aren't relying on just one person to be hot, right? So I when I did my draft the other day, I was looking at guys like Bobby Witt Jr., who had, stolen base capabilities and power. I grabbed a Fernando Tatis Jr., who has power and stolen bases. I grabbed a Corbin Carroll, who has power and stolen bases. Okay. Even a guy like Mookie Betts, who's been pretty consistent throughout the course of his career, is somebody that I was looking
at. I think Jazz is also a good fantasy option this year because of the short porch and right, the Yankee Stadium, and his speed. He's been saying he's going for a big number in steals this year and a big number of home runs. Absolutely. So keep an eye out for Jazz Chisholm. So keep on going, Chris.
Absolutely. And I was going to say a couple of, you could argue they're sleepers. Depends on how deep your team is, But I was going to say I was very impressed by Vinny Pasquantino in the World Baseball Classic. Yes. And he's started off pretty well for Kansas City again. He's somebody to keep an eye on for your team. that at first base you got to be looking at the guys like Pete Alonso, Vladdy Guerrero are going to be like,
Yeah.
but Vinny Pasquantino can be had a few rounds later, and he's somebody that could put up some really good numbers. Another sleeper is actually from my very own Boston Red Sox, Jarren Duran, who sort of a lot was made out of, is he going to get traded? Is he not going to get traded?
Yeah.
What position is he going to play? The Red Sox have too many outfielders. What's going to happen with Duran? And people forget that 2 seasons ago, he was a 7-8 WAR player, right?
Yeah.
And even last year, despite slumping a bit and not having quite the same numbers he did a couple years ago, was still 4 or 5 WAR. Now, granted, some of that comes from his defense because he's a phenomenal defensive player as well.
Exactly.
But he looked good in the World Baseball Classic, and he was hitting off of left-handed pitchers. And that's been the biggest question for him and Willie Abreu, who's another sleeper, also a Red Sox outfielder, who's had a fantastic start to the season so far. Really nearly gave the Red Sox 2 wins today and yesterday with his home runs. Obviously the bullpen didn't hold on for him, but he was the reason they were in it both times, right? Both of those players were hitting off of left-handed pitchers, which is something that they haven't done historically for the team. So if they have figured something out against lefties, at least enough to be capable and be able to be kept in the lineup against most lefties, they go from being, a bench bat, stick them in when the matchup's favorable to being a legitimate player for your lineup, and so that's something to keep an eye on for both of them as well.
Yeah, of course, 100%. For me, another guy that could be considered one of those multifaceted guys is a guy like O'Neil Cruz out in Cincinnati. His bat, his speed is, when he doesn't strike out. Now, granted, you'll take the risk of strikeout with percentage with Ali a lot of the time, but when he makes contact, either it's a gapper that could produce an inside the park home run triple really easily, or it's a electric single that gets them on base and gets them the opportunity to steal bags, or it goes over the fence by 400, 500 feet. So Ellie is one of those exciting players as well. Obviously Shohei Ohtani as well. When you got the two-way aspects with Shohei, you have to probably have him a lot of the time to be starting. But the Dodgers are trying to manage his innings. Another situation I want to talk to you about, Chris. I know we haven't really mentioned the Dodgers yet, but what are your thoughts on the Roki Sasaki situation? He has been coming in off a struggle. I don't know how he did his start the other day off the top of my head, but Roki Sasaki has struggled for the Dodgers the last couple of years, even though he had a good playoff run out of the bullpen and everything like that. What are your thoughts on Sasaki, real quick, before we get to
absolutely. No, I'm glad you brought that up because he had a relatively rough start, the other day as well, and it's a two-edged sword, right? Because he's young, he's just 22 now, I believe, right? And so you want to give him some leeway, especially adjusting to the United States, and people forget with his age, people wanted him to come in exactly like Yamamoto, right?
Yeah.
He's ready right away, going to be an ace right away because of his immense potential.
Yeah.
But Roki Sasaki was never meant to be that. If anything, he was coming in almost as like a AA, AAA type player that was being expected to be an ace right away.
Yeah.
Right? And so it came with a lot of expectations and pressure on him. So I wasn't shocked to see him struggle in his first season. And overall his numbers weren't awful. They weren't great, but they weren't awful. They were acceptable.
Yeah.
Right? But this year it has not been, he hasn't really, his spring training wasn't good. He's still not showing that much. And the question is, at this point, with the Dodgers having such a deep rotation, would they be better served putting him in the bullpen?
Yeah.
And you don't want to give up on such a young player right away at that, nor do you want to switch him back and forth to be like, okay, well, this year you're going to be bullpen, and then next year we're going to try you as a starter again. And then, you don't want to do that either, but I would say if by June there really still hasn't been any improvements there, I think the Dodgers have to consider moving him to bullpen full time and let him be a lights out closer because we saw what he can do as a closer.
Yes.
Right? You know, he said that he has been phenomenal at.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so it's got to be something that's on their mind. You know,
1,000%, 1,000%. And that rookie Sasaki, I just wanted to lead that into our division winners because obviously the Dodgers are going to win the NL West. Like it is by far they're the best. They're the best team in MLB, and they're probably a team that could win over 100 games, or maybe have a chance to break Seattle's 2001 record of 116 wins. They have an opportunity to do that. But if Sasaki doesn't get his pitching mechanics together or whatever the yips or whatever he has issue wise together at the moment, that could open the door for a Padres or someone like that to sneak in the back door and win this division because the Dodgers offensive bats, no one's touching that lineup. You get through it maybe once or twice without giving up too many runs, but the third time around they'll figure out the timing, like especially Betts and Ohtani and Freeman. Like they've been around for so long now, especially Betts and Freeman. Like they'll figure it out quick, fast, in a hurry. They'll figure out how to attack it and get enough run support for their pitching. So the Dodgers are the obvious pick in the NL West. I honestly have the Cubs second behind the Reds. I am hot on the Cincinnati team. I think the Cincinnati team's ready to make that leap right now to win the Central and NL Central to keep it in the NL to start. For me, I think the Pirates are a dark horse team, even though they haven't shown it over to that first weekend against New York because that's in New York. The Mets are supposed to be one of the best teams in the NL East, but I think the Pirates, if they can bring out Connor Griffin quick, fast, in a hurry to replace O'Neil Cruz out in center defensively, especially, I think the Pirates have a chance to be a dark horse team to make a wild card push in the NL Central as well. To get to the NL East real quick, I'm going to have the Phillies winning in the division with the Mets closely behind and the Braves third, and with both Mets and Braves making the postseason in the wild card for sure. Both those teams, all three of those teams are going to make the postseason. I don't know how, like I said, it could be like all three teams have legit shots to win the division. All three teams are going to make, I think all three teams are going to make the playoffs, but I think the Phillies, even though their rotation is not that great without with them losing Suarez, I just think the Phillies, this has to be the year, or it's not going to happen for them anytime soon. They have to break it up and rebuild it. So I think with that mindset, I think the Phillies are going to make noise at Citizens Bank this year and win the NL East again in the postseason. The American League side of things, I think we both might agree on two of the three divisions. The AL East, though, that's where it's a lot of jumbling. So I'll go ahead and see Seattle in the AL West is going to win the division hands down. I think they're the best team out there by far. They're probably a sneaky team to win the AL this year. A lot of popular. I think someone on Foul Territory, the Foul Territory podcast, had Seattle in the World Series. They're a trendy pick. I think they're going to win the West. I think that rotation. Julio, if Cal Riley gets his back going, we all know what he can do, as well as the rest of that lineup. It's just Randy Arozarena too, but that team's so good. The Central for me, the AL Central is the Detroit Tigers division to lose. That lead rotation, that three-headed monster of Skubal, Skubal and Valdez, with the rest of that rotation is just so good. From top to bottom, I think Cleveland could make a run. Kansas City is going to make a run at it. I was so close to picking Kansas City to win. I just don't think they have the pitching that Detroit does. I just don't think they have enough pitching because I love that lineup with two, like Bobby Witt, Maikel Garcia, Vinny Pasquantino, Caglione. Like they got a nasty lineup there in Missouri right now. It's crazy. But the final pick of my division winners, the AL East, the best division in baseball. I'm going to go with the Toronto Blue Jays. And And I think they're going to repeat his AL East chance just because I think when the rotation we talked about comes back fully healthy, I don't think anyone else in the division can keep up with that rotation all the way through. I know the Yankees have gotten better. Well, they didn't really make that many moves to get better, but they still have like a great offense. And I think Garrett Cole coming back could make them a good situation. I do have Boston as well as like in the second, third place tier right now. I do have the Red Sox up there. I think Baltimore will get close to that second or third. I just don't think they'll have enough to get there this year. I wanted to say Baltimore, but I believe in this team. I do believe in the Orioles, but I just don't believe them enough to get into that threshold, especially when you got teams like Texas and the other two teams I just mentioned, the AL East. It is going to be tough. And now with the 3 wild cards, I think the Baltimore has a chance in the AL wild card race. I really do, especially if Helsley keeps on pitching like he has been the first couple games. But with that being said, I think the Blue Jays are still the best team in the AL East right now. So go ahead and give me your division.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, I think there's no question the AL East is by far the best team. I mean, the best division in the league, right? Far and away. I mean, it's all 5 teams are good, and that's tough. I mean, imagine being some of these teams, like looking up and being like, how in the world did we get stuck all together, right?
Yeah.
And I think there's a world where the top 4 teams in the AL East are all playoff.
Yeah, that is a world. That's possible.
It's a very real possibility. I think the AL Central will have a little bit of something to say about that, but especially with this new schedule where you don't face, within your division as much as you used to, that helps the AL East a lot, right?
Yeah.
So I don't know if I could fully get this out of my mouth without throwing up a little bit, but I have the Yankees winning this division.
Okay.
And the reason I say that is because I think they're very comparable to Toronto, both pitching wise and offense wise.
Yeah.
I just think Toronto is due for a little bit of regression from what they did last year. That's the only reason. That's the only reason. I think they're they're 1A and 1B right now.
Mm-hmm.
So it could go either way. It's a coin flip. But I just think that that when the Yankees get healthy, that rotation will be good enough. And that offense is more than good enough, and I think they have that little bit of a hunger in them, that maybe, Toronto has, but also could be due for a little bit of regression. I think the Red Sox are the dark horse candidate out of the 3 for sure, because there's reliance so much on youth, right? And so the question is, how much can that youth carry the team? How much can Roman Anthony carry that offense? How much can, that bullpen, hold it down still? How much can, some of the other kids, I mentioned, I mean, Jared Duran, not really a kid anymore, Brave, not necessarily a kid anymore, but they're still relatively young. Will Marcelo Mayer be able to stay healthy for a whole year? Will Christian Campbell come back up and be a contributor for the team? There's a lot of ifs with a lot of the younger players. And so I think if everything falls into place right, I could very easily see them winning the division. I could also see them falling to 4th or potentially even dead last if the youth movement doesn't work out and they have some struggles and some growing pains. I mean, so that's the problem with the Red Sox. They have, in my opinion, the biggest variance of any of the 5 teams.
Boston has the variance. I think the Rays are close behind in that variance too because of the lack of pitch. They still have bullpen, but at the same time, like the true aces are not the same Rays like starting rotation as they used to be. Also, Baltimore is also very volatile as well in this division. I
would actually say, but between Baltimore and Boston, probably have the highest ceilings and the lowest floors of potentially the entire division. Really, I think Tampa Bay does have that variance, but I just don't think they have the same ceiling.
No, they don't have as high as
difference, for them. But we'll see. And then for the AL Central, I think Detroit has it. I think they have the experience. I think Kansas City's second.
Yeah.
I can never count out Cleveland because they just find ways, right?
They find ways to win games. Yep.
I completely agree with you in the West. I think Seattle, that's one of the I think both West Western divisions, I think, are the two easiest to
Yeah.
pick, in my opinion, actually.
Yeah.
I think Seattle is far and away the best team in their division, and I
Yeah.
think the Dodgers are far and away the best team in their division.
Yeah, 100%.
Despite the
Even
fact
though
that actually,
I think San Diego could give them a run for their money
for
with
sure.
the lineup, and you got a guy like Mason Miller who, by the way, I think has a new the new corn theme is up there with trumpets now.
Yeah.
But I had to
Yeah.
get that in there. But
Oh, yeah. No, sure.
San Diego has an opportunity to challenge LA.
They
I
do.
just don't think. I mean, the Texans Rangers are a good team, but they're
Yeah.
not Seattle. They're not
Yeah.
that Seattle Mariners team right now. So
I agree. I agree with that. And yeah, San Diego could definitely compete with the Dodgers. And it'll be very interesting actually with the we didn't talk about them at all. But the sale of their team should be happening at some point within the
yeah,
next couple months. And it'll be interesting who the new owner is and what that looks like for San Diego.
yeah,
That's a sort of a question mark that could go well or could go not
yeah.
so well for them depending on,
How the owner
what
wants to,
happens there.
if the owner wants to spend money or not spend money. If he
Exactly.
wants to not spend money, that could be a fire sale on some of these stuff they
Exactly.
got.
Because they only have so many ways to go cutting that money with all the big contracts that they had signed,
Yeah,
so we'll see what happens there. NL Central for me is the most exciting of the six divisions
yeah,
because I just don't there's nobody that stands out as perfect. You know what I mean? Like there's so many questions for all of the teams
yeah,
that I think it's going to be so much fun to watch them. I'm picking the Cubs because I think that they have the highest ceiling. But I
yes,
agree with you. That Reds team is so fun, and I would love for them to win that division.
yeah,
They're just a fun young bunch. I love rooting for Terry Francona. He's such a class act, such a
yeah,
brilliant Hall of Fame level
yeah,
coach for sure.
yeah,
And so I would love to see the Reds win. But I think the Cubs will have it. And again, just like I said with Cleveland, Milwaukee, you can't count out. Pittsburgh's a young team. I don't think they're there yet, but you
yeah.
never know with them. And St. Louis, I mean, and another younger team that you never know.
Well,
What's
that's the thing. The weird thing about St. Louis is they had that huge fire sale in the offseason and everything
good,
like that, getting rid of Nolan Arenado and guys like that. And it's just,
good.
I just don't know what St. Louis is going to be this year. I think they're finally going towards rebuilding that, and it sucks for St.
Yeah,
Louis fans because I think they're one of the best fan bases in baseball right now. Is that St. Louis fan base, and they're going to have to suffer through maybe a couple year drought of not really doing anything for a little
yeah,
bit. Try to get back to the promised land of
exactly.
winning the World Series,
And,
but
and I think they are in rebuild mode because I think that's why they brought in Bloom. Right? I
yeah,
don't think they would have brought in Bloom if it wasn't a full rebuild because really his only strength when he was in Boston was his minor league system,
yeah,
right? And I think that's what they're trying to get at with the Cardinals,
yeah,
right? And then the AL East, I agree with you, will be the Phillies, I think. But I think the Mets are right there. I think it's going to be a 1-2 punch. And if the Braves can get healthy and hang in there while they're not healthy, they certainly have the talent, right?
yeah,
The question is, can they weather all their injuries enough?
yeah. I
Um,
agree.
so
I
that's
think getting to some of the awards and stuff too. I don't mean to steal your thunder. I'll just go ahead and give mine real quick.
go ahead.
AL MVP Aaron Judge, NL MVP Shohei Ohtani. Those are easy picks. Again, I would love to say someone else for the AL like a Bobby Witt Jr. or Gunnar Henderson or some be bold like that, but I just don't. If Aaron Judge continues to be Aaron Judge, I just don't see why. Anyone other than him will win an MVP. And same with Ohtani. I mean, Ohtani's probably the best player in baseball right now, and that Dodgers team is going to win a lot of games. And normally, so it's those MVPs are easy. I think for me, the Cy Young's where it's going to be interesting this year. Obviously, you got Skeens and Skubal, the two winners last year. I could see Skubal repeating. I don't see Skeens repeating. I love Paul Skeens. Don't get me wrong. Like Paul Skeens was one of those amazing young pitchers, and he's going to be a cornerstone for years to come. Hopefully in Pittsburgh, but if he gets moved, he gets moved like they do every so often with their stars, for some reason. But I think I liked Hunter Green to win the Cy Young this year in the NL. That is my bold pick with the Cy Young. I'm going to pick Hunter Green. I'm going to pick Hunter Green to win it. So that was why I think for me, Hunter Green is ready to make that leap and to win. Another guy for me too in the Cy Young aspect is, trying to think. Another name is Christopher Sanchez for the Phillies. That's another name for me that could sneak into this NL Cy Young conversation very easily if he keeps on his momentum. Also in the AL, I could see you Savage, like I said earlier, sneak into that conversation too. Right now, my AL Rookie of the Year is the Lauder. I just like Murakami. It has a case for that, obviously. But I think the Lauder is going to hold them off. NL Rookie, that's on the little tougher side because I don't know who are some of the rookies in the NL off the top of my head. I think, but if I had to pick one, if he gets called up, Connor Griffin, I'm going to pick Connor Griffin for the Pirates to win NL Rookie. So
there you
that's
go.
my list.
I like it. Yeah, so I would just say really quickly, just going to run through mine. Yeah, Judge and Ohtani are the clear picks there. So I'm going to go out on a limb, and I'm going to say if Kansas City makes the playoffs, Witt will get the MVP.
I love it. I love it.
Prediction. Let's go for it. On the Cy Young, I don't have any bold prediction against Ohtani. He just does because he played both sides of the both pitcher and hitter.
I see. You're going to give it to Ohtani over a guy like Skeens, or Hunter Green. I like it. I get it.
Yeah.
I think if he has the starts, if he doesn't have the starts, then it's obviously probably going to be one of the guys, like one of the aces, one of the main guys. Yeah. But if he has to start,
my other dark horse for Cy Young for NL is Yuri Perez.
Yes,
down in Miami.
Yes.
So you know what? I'm gonna lock in on Yuri Perez. If you put something in my head right now and said you need to pick somebody, I'm picking Yuri Perez. I think he's built, for a great year this year. And in the AL, this may sound like a homer pick, but he was so close last year. Garrett Crochet. I think he pulls it off this year. I really do.
Yeah, it's interesting with the Schoolboy Crochet debate. It is a really interesting debate between those two. Mm-hmm. I just think Schoolboy on a contract year is going to make sure to keep his dominance the way he.
Hear that. I hear that, and that makes sense, But I think that the X factor for Crochet this year is how much the Red Sox improved their infield defense over the course of the winter, and so I think that's going to be enough for him to push him over the edge. So that's my AL prediction. And then I can't disagree with you with the Lauder, for AL Rookie of the Year. Yep. NL Rookie of the Year, I just like last year, there was nobody that fully stood out necessarily. Yeah. It ended up as sort of a hodgepodge of a lot of pretty good players that nobody really saw coming. And I actually think that's what's going to happen again this year.
Yeah, exactly.
I think it's going to be a surprise player that we're not thinking of right now. And so I don't know if I could pull the trigger on anybody right now.
I was having a tough time with it. I think in the back of my mind, I'm waiting for Pittsburgh to call up Connor Griffin after his spring training. He was so good in spring training for the Pirates, and I know he needed some more time down in AAA. But I think once he gets the call up, and if he gets hot in the MLB, I think he will be the popular pick because he was trending all spring training long for everywhere you see is Connor Griffin, this Connor Griffin, that, even SDS, San Diego Studios decided to make him the reward card for the spring breakout, collection in the show for that program in Diamond Dynasty, based on the hype that he had and everything like that. So, yeah. If I had to, and then another one could be JJ Weatherall too. Just depends on if he.
I was thinking of him.
If he's consistent with good Cardinals, but.
And here's another dark horse for you, and I don't even have a name as much as a position. One of the Braves starting pitchers.
Yes.
Because they're going to have to rely on those young pitchers at this point. And I just see one of them. They seem to crank out a random Cy Young candidate every other year, right? Yeah. Out of nowhere, so I think they could have
the Braves are a factory of starters that you'd never know can
Exactly.
pitch, and then they're going to come out and do some stuff.
Exactly.
Yeah, I was so close to picking Gunner, but the fact that he's had a slow start, I kind of got me off of that a little bit. I think he'll bounce back and have still a great year for Baltimore, but I just don't think it's MVP worthy. I just don't think it's going to be MVP worthy, especially with Aaron Judge hitting the 2 home runs the other day.
Yeah.
I think he's still going to mash the baseball. So
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Well, I think, for the most part, we've covered all the major topics today. There's always stuff to cover in baseball, right? Because
yes.
it's the one sport that's every day. All the teams are playing all the time.
Yeah.
Right. So we'll have plenty more to talk about. For those of you who are watching along with us, thank you so much for tuning into our inaugural Off the Wall Baseball podcast here. We'll have plenty more of these to come. We'll be on this time, hopefully, moving forward, as we figure out the schedule and figure out everything that's going to work, we'll discuss moving forward. But we will definitely be here for the long haul, and we are so thankful for you guys tuning in with us. If you have anything you want to add to the discussion, please pop into the chat and talk with us. We love bouncing ideas back and forth with fans. So make sure to tune in. First, Brandon, do you want to tell everybody where to follow you? And I know you're a huge sports guy, so.
Yeah, so obviously my Twitter handle is there at 30BLS, and my X handle, whatever you want to call it nowadays. Also, Ellis Highlight Reel on TikTok, Ellis Highlight Reel on YouTube. I will be reposting some of the shorts from these podcasts on there, on my channels and stuff like that, and resharing it on my Instagram at 32BLS, at BLS32 on Instagram as well. Resharing all of these posts and everything like that. But yeah, no, I'm looking forward to this marathon, man, with you, because this was fun. I love talking baseball, and I know I'm on a lot of these podcasts here at Total Apex, and I'm one of the co-hosts on the main show and everything like that. And I know we try to get some of the baseball stuff on that show, but I feel like with this show we can deep dive, and I love to deep dive into baseball. So I'm glad you had me on for this episode. And
thank you so much for joining me. I love talking baseball too. I could talk for hours upon hours about baseball, right? And I think, especially during the season, there's so much to talk about all the time. Our goal was to be about an hour. We went a little bit over this today, but I think as an inaugural episode, it's hard to squeeze in everything we want to talk about.
Yeah, an hour. We won't have I think moving forward, I think we can make the hour every week, and everything like that. But at the same time, this episode we had to kind of get our predictions out. That's the time of year. It's the time of year for predictions, and we'll probably get into World Series next week. We didn't really get our World Series picks, but
tune in next week. Some of you will bring up our predictions from today and use it against us at the end of the year when inevitably everything we said is completely wrong, right, with something or another.
Exactly.
So, and for those of you watching along, obviously, you can check out me as well. My X handle is on the screen, and please make sure to check out Total Apex Sports in general. TotalApexSports.com, where you can get all your up-to-date baseball information there, as well as all your other sports. They covered a little bit of everything over there, so make sure to be checking them out. Some phenomenal writers over there. But so from Brandon and Chris, Total Apex, this is the Off the Wall podcast. We look forward to seeing you in the future. And thank you so much for tuning in. Take care, y'all.